My grandmother left me only a necklace while the rest of the family fought over money. But that necklace unlocked the truth. When Grandma Elise died, the reading of her will felt like a corporate negotiation, not a farewell to the woman who raised me. The lawyer's voice was clinical, the air in the room too cold, and my aunts and uncles too eager. Her estate was no small thing, a $2.5 million portfolio, real estate in Vermont, and the famous Lakewood property that had been in our family for 3 generations. I sat quietly in the back, the only granddaughter, barely acknowledged, just like always. Mom died when I was 10 and Grandma took me in. But to the rest of them, I was the charity case. The orphan girl. The reminder of a family branch they'd cut off long ago. So when the lawyer cleared his throat and said, to my granddaughter Lila, I leave the rose gold locket that she always admired as a child, the silence was deafening. A locket. That's it. While my Uncle Grant got the vacation house and Aunt Rachel sobbed dramatically over the stocks and antiques, I was handed a palm-sized velvet box. I should have felt humiliated. I should have walked out. But I didn't. Because Grandma Elise never did anything by accident. The locket was delicate, old, and warm to the touch, like it had just been worn. Inside was a faded photo of her as a young woman and something even stranger, a paper-thin metal key tucked behind the lining. No one noticed. No one cared. They were too busy arguing over who got the china or whether the Bentley should be sold or kept in the family. I stayed at the house that night alone. I couldn't stomach the idea of watching them toast her death with her own wine. I wandered into Grandma's room. It smelled like lavender and old wood. Her journals were gone. Drawers ransacked. Safe open and emptied. But there was one place they hadn't looked, the little music box on her dresser. I'd played with it for years. Everyone thought it was broken. But the key in my locket fit perfectly into the base. It clicked. And the box opened not with music but with a pop-up panel inside the lid. A tiny compartment, expertly hidden. Inside was a letter. It was addressed to me. Lila, if you're reading this, it means I trusted you more than I feared the consequences. You deserve the truth about this family. Start with the black book beneath the floorboards in my closet. Then find the safe deposit key. Be careful who you trust. Even blood lies. My breath caught. Floorboards. I tore back the carpet in her walk-in closet and felt for loose wood. There in the far corner was a warped slat. Underneath, a thick, leather-bound journal and a second key, this one labeled Sequoia Bank Box 312. I didn't sleep that night. I read. And I wish I hadn't. Because what I found in that journal made me realize the inheritance was built on betrayal, and someone in this family might have killed to keep it secret. The leather cover of Grandma's journal creaked softly as I turned the pages, the scent of worn paper rising like dust from memory. It began with delicate, intimate reflections, her first love, the early days with my grandfather, a long-ago dream of moving to coastal California. But only a few pages in, the tone darkened. I never forgave myself for what happened to my sister. But they told me if I didn't sign the papers, they'd take Lila too. I stopped breathing. Her sister? Margaret. She had a sister named Margaret. I read faster, now scanning each line with dread and desperation. The pages were packed with tightly written paragraphs, some shaky, others scribbled as if time had been against her. The Lakewood deed should never have passed to me. Margaret threatened to go public with the accounting discrepancies. She had evidence. And then, she vanished. No report. No funeral. Just whispers and silence. It wasn't a runaway story. It was a disappearance cloaked in family convenience. Names began appearing again and again. Grant. Rachel. Martin. My so-called great-uncle Martin. She hinted at bribes. A false psychiatric evaluation. A woman silenced because she knew too much. By sunrise, my hands ached from turning pages. But one final line made my whole body go numb. She left behind a daughter. I did what I had to do. I named her Lila after the flower her mother loved. My throat tightened. I couldn't swallow. I wasn't Elisa's granddaughter. I was her niece. Margaret's daughter. That morning the world tilted beneath my feet. And I knew there was more. I grabbed the second key, Sequoia Bank Box 312, and drove without telling anyone. The woman at the bank was polite but curious as I signed in. The box slid forward on gleaming steel runners. Inside, wrapped in lavender tissue and legal folders, were 2 dusty VHS tapes, a photo album tied in ribbon, and a thick envelope labeled in Elisa's handwriting. To be opened only if I go missing. At the bottom of the box I found something that made my knees weaken. A birth certificate. Lily Margaret Emerson. Born March 7, 1995. Mother, Margaret Emerson. No father listed. I was born on March 7, 1995. I wasn't just part of this family. I was the erased piece. Everything Elise had done, every lie, every guarded silence, was an attempt to protect me. But protect me from what? From whom? I glanced over my shoulder. A man in a navy coat had walked in behind me. He didn't take a number. Just stood by the fake ferns, watching the counter. His eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. I clutched the key and the documents to my chest. My fingers trembled. This was no longer about inheritance. No longer about a locket or a will. This was about something buried so deep, someone was still watching. And I was finally awake enough to see it. I walked out of the bank, slow and steady, pretending I didn't notice him fall in behind me. But I did. And I knew, the real story hadn't even started yet. I drove in loops for over an hour, changing lanes without signaling, turning randomly into neighborhoods I didn't know, until I was sure I wasn't being followed. My phone was off. I didn't trust it not to betray me. Not anymore. Not after what I just learned. I ended up parked outside the one place that felt untouched by any of this, the old library near my middle school. It smelled like dust and paper, exactly like I remembered. I sat in the back corner by the forgotten genealogy section, spread out the contents of the deposit box, and tried to steady my hands. There were 2 VHS tapes. One labeled 1989 Margaret. The other 1995 Baby. I didn't need to guess. The year she vanished. The year I was born. There was also a ledger, a proper one, heavy with handwritten notes. Elise had tracked everything: money movements, signatures, false documents. It read like an investigator's notebook. But the most chilling detail was what she had highlighted over and over. Martin controlled the Lakewood deal, but Grant controlled Margaret's exit. My stomach twisted. I remembered Grant's face at the will reading. The way he smiled when my name was skipped. The glint of satisfaction, of dominance. And now I had a map, proof that something was buried beneath Lakewood. Literally. Elise had written in the margin, crawlspace, west wing. Trapdoor. Covered after 1990. It took everything I had not to scream. That house. That pristine, staged mansion they all fought for like dragons over gold. It might be hiding her. My mother. I needed help. But not from family. Not from anyone who knew them. So I called the only person I could trust not to be on the inside. Detective Alana Rios. The woman who handled my high school stolen laptop case with so much quiet tenacity I never forgot her name. She answered on the second ring. Still sharp. Still calm. Detective Rios, she said. I took a breath. It's Lila Emerson. I need to report a disappearance. When did it happen? 1990, I whispered. And I think I know where the body is. Detective Rios didn't laugh, didn't ask if this was a joke, didn't hang up. She just said, "Where are you now?" I gave her the address of the library. She was there in less than 20 minutes, plain clothes, clipboard in hand, and a calm expression that told me I'd made the right call. She sat across from me, scanned the documents I'd laid out on the table, and when she reached the birth certificate, she looked up. "You understand what this means legally?" she asked. I nodded. It means I'm not who I thought I was. And someone made sure of that. The rest of our conversation happened in hushed voices, her pen moving steadily. I showed her Elise's journal, pointed to the crawlspace note, and told her about the man at the bank. Her eyes sharpened at that. "You have somewhere safe to stay?" "I've been staying at Elise's house, but..." "That's not safe anymore," she cut in gently. "They know who you are now. Or at least, they know you know something." The phrase made me shiver. We agreed to meet the next morning sunrise, outside the Lakewood estate. She'd file for a search order, quietly, under a preservation clause for historical property. I would bring everything, the journal, the tapes, the ledger. That night, I didn't go back to Elise's house. I checked into a cheap roadside motel 2 towns over, paid cash, left my phone battery out. I lay on the bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, hearing Elise's voice in every creak of the wood. Even blood lies. At dawn, I met Rios outside the gates. The house looked different now, not like home, not like a legacy. Like a crime scene waiting to exhale. She wore gloves. Brought another officer. Didn't tell me his name. We entered through the back, avoiding the front drive where the family might have cameras. She moved quickly, deliberately, like she'd walked the blueprint already. We made it to the west wing, an old sitting room no one used anymore, full of white sheet-covered furniture and the smell of old plaster. Rios moved the rug aside, then knelt and knocked. A hollow sound answered back. The trapdoor wasn't even nailed shut, just buried beneath layers of indifference. She pried it open with a crowbar. The air that came out was colder than it should have been. We descended. It wasn't a large space. Maybe 4 feet high. Just enough to crawl. Dust clung to every beam. And in the far corner, behind what looked like a stack of sealed trunks, was a depression in the dirt. Slight. Disturbed. Rios stopped moving. She didn't say anything. Just radioed for forensics. I stood in silence as they cordoned the area, unearthed fragments. A shoe. Then a bone. One of the forensic techs muttered a curse under his breath. The officer next to me turned away and threw up in the bushes. They found remnants of fabric. Something floral. And a bracelet Elise once described in her journal. Silver. Etched with the letter M. Rios walked back to me, slow and steady. We won't have full confirmation until dental records or DNA, she said. But it's her, I whispered. And then, like the air had finally ruptured, I sobbed. Not loud. Not wild. Just deep, heaving grief. For a woman I never got to meet. For a mother I only knew through whispers and tragedy. As they lifted the remains from the crawlspace, Rios placed a hand gently on my shoulder. I believe you, she said. And I'm going to help you make them answer for this. The headlines broke before I was ready. Remains of local heiress found beneath family estate, suspected homicide. They didn't use her name at first. Just heiress. Just a body. Just a symbol. But I knew her name. Margaret Emerson. My mother. Within 2 days, the estate was overrun by police tape, reporters with long lenses, and family members crawling out of their holes like rats sensing smoke. Grant gave a statement to the press, all false sorrow and weathered gravitas, claiming he was deeply shocked and had no idea. Rachel sobbed on cue. Martin was nowhere to be found. And I was invisible. Just like before. But not for long. Detective Rios kept her promise. She didn't just dig up bones, she dug into everything Elise left behind. The tapes. The ledger. The journal entries cross-checked with court records, bank transfers, and witness statements. Every thread Elise started, Rios finished weaving. There was a paper trail from Lakewood's transfer of ownership in 1990 that had never been properly notarized. Signatures were forged and Elise had known. She kept originals. Stashed them in the envelope marked if I go missing. They hadn't killed Elise because she was quiet. They'd let her live because she played the long game. Because she pretended to forget. But she'd been documenting them for decades. That night, I stayed in a different motel. Every time I tried to sleep, I saw the crawl space. The bracelet. The face I imagined my mother might have had. Young. Brave. Silenced. My phone buzzed around 3 a.m. A blocked number. I answered. Silence. Then a voice. Male. Croaky. Threatening. You don't know what you're doing, girl. Walk away, or you'll end up just like her. He hung up. I stared at the screen until it went dark. By sunrise, I was at the police station. Rios listened, took the phone, and ordered a trace. Then she leaned in and said something I hadn't expected. You have grounds to file civil claims and challenge the will. But that's not what this is about anymore, is it? I shook my head. This is about the truth. She nodded once. Then let's finish it. She got me into the archive vault, a dusty basement beneath the county courthouse, full of files no one touched in years. And there, wedged between zoning records and deed maps, we found it. A statement from a housekeeper. Dated March 1990. It had been flagged as irrelevant at the time. I heard Mr. Grant yelling. He said, she's going to ruin everything. I'll make sure she never speaks again. And then I never saw Miss Margaret after that. It had been buried under a clerical note. No follow-up necessary. Grant had been protected. All these years. But not anymore. Not with Elise's ledger. Not with my DNA. Not with a dead woman's bracelet in a police evidence bag. And not with me finally remembering the scream I heard at 5 years old. I had blocked it out. Or maybe they had made sure I forgot. But it came back in a motel room, under flickering yellow light, the memory I didn't know I carried. My mother yelling my name. A door slamming. And then silence. I had been there. I was a witness they never counted on surviving. The scream haunted me more after I remembered it. It didn't come like a movie flashback, neat and clear. It came like a smell I couldn't name but had always known. The moment of my mother's death, once buried in the fog of childhood trauma, was no longer silent. And with that sound came something else. Her face. Not in photographs. Not in Elise's letters. In my own mirror. I saw it now, the same jawline, the same eyes. I had carried her with me all along. Rios arranged a formal interview, this time with a forensic memory specialist. I wasn't sure if I could trust my mind, but the fragments I gave them, the words, the hallway, the smell of paint thinner, the flash of silver jewelry, matched the timeline too well to be coincidence. They asked if I would testify. I said yes before they finished the question. Meanwhile, the media exploded. They named her Margaret Emerson, disappeared daughter, buried mother. And me, her lost child, suddenly had a face they could put on every newsreel, every thumbnail, every headline with too few facts and too much speculation. Grant's lawyers released a statement. These are wild allegations, deeply hurtful and completely unfounded. But the forensics spoke louder than any denial. The dental records matched. The ledger's signatures were confirmed as forged. And then the tapes. One from 1989. A grainy VHS mess of a home movie filmed on Christmas Eve. In it, Margaret stood near the fireplace, holding me, a baby swaddled in lavender. Behind her, barely in frame, was Grant. He didn't know he was being recorded, but his words made it to tape. She won't get away with this. She opens her mouth, she dies. And Elise's handwriting on the label, keep. Do not erase. By then, Grant knew he was cornered. And when men like him are cornered, they do one of two things. They try to run, or they try to bury the evidence again. The night before his arrest, I received another call. No words. Just breathing. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Then a whisper. You should have stayed quiet. But this time I didn't just listen. I recorded it. Traced the number. Forwarded it to Rios. And then I went to the Lakewood estate one last time. Not alone. With Rios. With officers. With gloves and warrants in the cold calm of truth on our side. We walked the halls like we were claiming a battlefield. Because that's what it was. And somewhere in that house, Elise's portrait still hung. Smiling. Knowing. Like she had planned every move right up to this moment. And maybe she had. The trial began 8 months later. By then, Grant had been indicted on charges ranging from fraud and forgery to conspiracy to commit murder. They didn't get him on the actual killing, not yet, but Rios promised me it was coming. For now they'd break him with what they had. I sat on the witness stand with shaking hands but a spine made of steel. I had Elise's letters. The tapes. The housekeeper's statement. The journal. And my own voice. I told them everything. About the locket. About the key. About the ledger. About the scream I carried for 2 decades without knowing. The courtroom was silent as I spoke. Even Grant, once smug, now sat like stone, his jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on the table. Rachel refused to show up. Martin filed for medical exemption. Cowards both. But justice, slow and grinding, has a strange patience. Rios testified after me. Her voice never cracked. Her file was thick. Her evidence airtight. She dismantled their lies with precision. Like slicing a snake open to show the rot inside. The jury looked tired, angry, shaken. And I looked at them, hoping at least one of them understood that this wasn't just a family fight. This was what happened when truth was buried to protect power. When the verdict came, I didn't hold my breath. Because I already knew. Guilty. Forgery. Fraud. Conspiracy. And though he hadn't yet been charged with the murder itself, the judge denied bail. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. I closed my eyes and thought of Elise's voice. I trusted you more than I feared the consequences. She'd known. She trusted I would follow the trail. And I had. Later that night, I sat alone in the Lakewood Library. The house was quiet, stripped of its illusions. I pulled down a book I knew Elise had loved, opened the cover, and found her handwriting in the margin. For the one who dares to remember. Tears slid down my face. Not from grief. From relief. She'd always seen me. Even when no one else did. I turned off the light, closed the door, and left the house behind. For the first time, it wasn't mine to mourn. It was hers. And Margaret's. And now maybe it could finally rest. A year after the verdict, I returned to Lakewood one final time. Not to stay. Not to claim. But to bury. We held a memorial for Margaret. Not in a chapel, not in a courtroom, but in the garden Elise once tended with bare hands and muddy knees. I planted a single magnolia tree. White blossoms like the one she wore in her hair on that last Christmas Eve. Only a few people came. Detective Rios, the housekeeper's granddaughter, a lawyer who had the decency to admit what the system ignored. No cameras, no press, just a circle of quiet grief, and something softer too. Something like peace. After the service, I walked through the house one last time. The walls no longer whispered. The mirrors no longer held secrets. It was just a house now. And I, just a woman no longer waiting for permission to speak. I donated the tapes and journals to a historical trust. The ledger went into the record. The portrait of Elise, the one that watched over everything, I took with me. Hung it in my apartment above the kitchen table. She deserved to watch something good grow for once. As for me, I kept the locket. Not for the metal or the photo inside, but because it reminded me that sometimes the smallest things carry the heaviest truths. I've started writing again. Not just this story, but others. Stories about women who were never allowed to finish their sentences. Stories that don't end with silence. And when people ask me now who I am, I don't hesitate. I'm Margaret Emerson's daughter. Not hidden. Not ashamed. And not afraid.